So we have gone live. We are broadcasting to all parts of the galaxy right now. And I want to welcome all of you to the Convention of States meeting at the HaOlam Messianic Synagogue. And I just want to give the welcome in these terms. Some people have come up and thanked me that we're making our facility available, but I want to thank you. And I'll tell you how passionate I am about what is happening tonight. At least I hope what will further a little bit. In the beginning of 2020, when the lockdown took place and Trump was yet in office then, they came out with this package to supplement small businesses and help people. And we were already $23 trillion in debt as a nation. And part of that package was the CARES package, was to offer small businesses and congregations qualified with money to pay payroll. And I thought, you know what? This is not Saudi Arabia or China where the government actually has money to give away. We're $23 trillion in debt then, and we have never accepted government money for anything that I can think of in our 26 years of existence. We're not going to accept borrowed money now. We'll go out of business rather than take government money. Thank you. And so we just determined, my elders, everybody agreed. I got no kickback on it. And we commenced, and then the lockdown took place, and we were restricted to 10 people in-house and broadcasting. And I got to tell you, God blessed us, prospered us. We did not fall short. In fact, since we went to video much more than previously, we had a guy who was really an expert in video issues, and he said, your back wall is too dark. It needs to be lighter, because it was that color previously. So we thought about painting it, but then we'd also thought about a plan we'd had or an ambition we'd had for years. So we went to a vendor in town. The Nachum family are Israelis, and they actually go to Jerusalem and get leftover stone from building projects, because Jerusalem's the city of gold, and it's gold, pink gold. Anyhow, that is real Jerusalem stone that we put across the front. And then the stonemason who put it up, we told him, and it was his idea as well, not to put any mortar in the cracks, so you can put prayer requests in this part of the Jerusalem stone Western Wall. So all I'm saying is, God honored, God blessed us. We did not take any government money, and God provided, and He's going to continue to provide. And we are dreadful of that 23 trillion, which was a terrible number then, is now 28, and they're wanting to another. Anyhow, you know all the numbers. I won't bore you with that. But I'm just really glad that this work is happening here. And may it go forward. May it go forward in power. May we pass a balanced budget amendment tonight. Well, maybe not. But anyhow, as soon as possible. And I'll turn this over to the people. Colleen, I think you're the one that goes first. So bless you. Let's give her a welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi. We can't thank you enough for opening your facility and providing us with this wonderful space, and we had no idea we'd have such a wonderful speaker on top of that. Thank you very much. I am Connie Davidson, and I'm district captain for 18, and I'm with Convention of States. And I'm here as a person who loves my country, has served my country, retired military nurse, and I'm here to say that until my dying day, I'm going to fight. and I hope everybody else feels the same. I'm District 18, and a dear friend that I've met, Patricia Younger, Patricia is also with Convention of States, Patricia Younger. This is her place of worship, and she came and offered us this facility, and it's just wonderful. So I can't thank her enough either. And then when I got into Convention of States, I met I'm just going to tell a really dear friend, Angela Carroll. And Angela is part of District 16. And so District 16 and District 18 are the districts who we put this together, and to try to start getting out into the Kansas City area more, into Kansas more and more, this grassroots movement that we want to start to engage people to start fighting and to save this country. And we're going to do that. We will do this. It's not that we can, we will. And I also want to, Dave, is Dave here? No, okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about just a little bit was I've been reading a book that has really been giving me a lot of inspiration, and his name is Will Witt. And Will's a young man, and he started out as an extreme leftist, and somewhere he has some stories of how he kind of started getting a little bit more to the center and the center. And then he met Dennis Prager. And I don't know if you people are aware of Dennis Prager, but he's an outstanding scholar, outstanding man of God. And he started Prager University, and Will got involved in Prager University, and he has a wonderful way of going out to people and getting them kind of off guard, I guess you might say, in the way that he talks to people to try to get them like, well, why would you do that? Or, oh, did you know that we're $27 trillion in debt? And they go, oh, no. He'll go out and ask young people on college campuses, how much in debt are we? Oh, 3 million. Oh, 6 million, things. He's just wonderful. And he has written a new book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence Enemies. And he divides things out in racism, CRT stuff, just how you can engage people and how to talk to younger people, all people, and kind of get them like, oh, we're not enemies, and open their mind to certain questions. And that's how the book is written. He gives you some facts, and then he gives you questions on how to kind of like have them answer, like, oh, you're just talking, and then suddenly they can't answer a question, and then you can engage them. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. But he said something that I thought I would like before I turn it over to Ben. He says, it is easy to stay silent and say nothing, but I promise you that if you choose to do that, America will be lost. There is no better time to stand up and be a fighter than right now. And I fear that if we don't, our very way of life, the traditional American values we know and need, will be gone forever. 10 years from now, do you want to look back on your life and say, I was someone who stood back and watched my country crumble around me? Now, this is a young man, so we have a lot of hope, a lot of hope. And it always reminds me, I'm sure that, Rabbi, you know this story, but it was a story of a man in Germany who basically, I think he was one of the last ones to finally go to a concentration camp, but he would say, I didn't pay attention when, my fellow neighbor left, and that didn't matter to me, and it didn't matter to me that the groceryman was gone, it didn't matter to me, but finally they knocked at my door, and then there was nobody who could come take care of me. And he's a very famous poet. You probably know who he is, Rabbi. I don't know him, I just know the story, but I really feel that that's where we are. I don't think it's ever too late to just stand up and say, I'm not going to be the last one when they knock at my door and not say anything. So tonight we have been Terrell, and Ben's been with, how long have you been with Convention of States? Years, okay. But he has been, but he's kind of our, I guess you would say our political representative in the state of Kansas too, besides having been the district captain and several other things. But he is one of our most knowledgeable people. Well, we have lots of them, but he's the one we turn to a lot when it comes to election stuff and stuff like that and what's going on in Kansas and places. So he's going to present a program, and I'll let him take it from here. One last thing is there's a bunch of information back in the back. Convention of States, if you have not signed the petition that you would like Kansas to be In the convention, there's, you can go online to Convention of States and sign up there, or there's sign-up sheets in the back. Once you sign up, you'll get notice of your representative and your district and stuff, and Ben will kind of go into that. But we also have a bunch of local stuff back in the back. There's guides to Shawnee, the people running for school boards in Blue Valley, Overland Park, and Olathe. So we had somebody speak last night from Olathe running for the school board. She said only 11% or 12% came out for the 14% came out for the preliminaries or whatever. We need people out there to vote. We can win these school boards back if people go vote. We have to vote. We can't stand back. Okay, Ben.
Wow, what an honor. Thank you for having us. My name is Ben Terrell, and so Ben's easy. Sometimes Terrell gets stumbled over. You won't have to address me by my last name, so that's just an identifier. I'd like to begin the evening the way I normally do presentations, which is to do a Pledge of Allegiance. If you don't mind, you may join me by standing up. Of course, veterans are all have the option to offer a salute, but here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, well, Convention of States is the name of our organization, and I'm going to walk you through tonight fairly briskly why we exist, what we're doing, what our plan is, and where we got the whole idea from. So there will be time for questions and hopefully answers at the end of our time together. So I think someone has some index cards and pencils they're passing around. Okay, let's get started. So let's talk about the problem. The rabbi here eloquently stated one of our problems, which is our debt. I love this hat that Connie just gave me. If you can read it, and if you can't, it says, this is the government the founders warned us about. And so true. So there's a problem, and that's why we exist. The problem to deal with, this is last year's slide program, and we talked about debt. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of these things, but debt and spending, federal overreach, like you have to have the shot no matter what's in it, just because we say so. Career politicians, term limits, things like that. This is this year's slide. There's so many things going on with taking over our schools, taking over the definition of words, that what it's really come to is socialism. We have government making deals and working hand in hand with technology companies to censor our speech or to spy on us. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who was President Trump's first national security advisor, was, before he had a chance to even get his feet on the ground, was grabbed by the FBI because they had already tapped his phone, which they had no legal right to do. So what is socialism? Well, going back to school book definitions, and I just happened to major in political science, and I went to a conservative university. So socialism is a political system based on group or government ownership and administration of all resources. It's also a stage in Marxist theory, or now critical social justice theory used to move from individual control of resources to communism. So what is a solution or the solution to this? What did the founders say? The framers that wrote our Constitution. What does the Constitution itself say, and what is our plan? In a word, is federalism. Federalism is a big word that many of us have learned in school, but what it really means is the framers did understand that human nature better than our contemporaries do. Human nature is selfish. Human beings are corrupt. The Bible is really accurate. And so what they did, of course, was construct a form of government that had competing ambitions. So the president could not declare war, but he was given charge of waging war. Congress had to declare war and approve of the funds, and at one time, and still perhaps so, approve of people over a certain rank that have authority of the military. That's just one such example. So federalism, in our context here, is government administered by dual sovereigns. In the United States, the national government was created by the states, who ceded some, but not all, of their sovereignty. American federalism was designed to give the national government specific powers, separate from the powers retained by the states, and to give both a check on each other for the people's good. Because we are the sovereigns in this system. Some examples of federal power include declaring war, establishing the military, etc., borrowing on the credit of states, establishing uniform rules for naturalization and bankruptcy, coining money, delivering the mail, interstate commerce, supreme and inferior courts, and treaties. State powers is everything else required to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. This is out of the, this is out of the Constitution. Some protections of federalism. There's many of them actually in the Constitution where, for example, we learned last year that the states run the elections for president and for the Congress people. But of course now the federal government wants to control that to get the desired end result. Here are some others. In Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, the states had a presence in the Congress by selecting their own senators to represent each state, and there are 2 for each state, no matter what the population. Number 2 is Article 5, which we'll talk about. State legislatures must ratify any amendments to the Constitution. So usually, whoever has control over the rules is the person who has the power, right? And that shows you that the states were meant to have ultimate power. But according to Article 5, they can also initiate amendments. And finally, you can see it summed up in the 9th and 10th Amendments. Long about 1913, it was a bad year for the Constitution. The 17th Amendment was passed, and the selection of senators went from the state legislatures to a popular vote. So now senators, instead of being well-known people that are could be looked to be responsive for a state's needs, all they have to do is be popular and raise a lot of money and get a lot of votes. Americans live under state and national governments that share some sovereignty and still have some separate sovereignty. And this diagram is just one way of trying to throw those things out to you. You can see the national powers over here, the shared powers, and specific state powers. We could make those lists longer. For example, the state powers are responsible for making regulations for marriage. The federal government got involved in that a few years ago. So what we're living in now can be called coercive federalism, where if you think of an arm wrestling match, one of the arms is down, and that's the state's arm. It can also almost be, as a political scientist and historian, it can also really almost be defined as fascism, where Mussolini defined fascism as nothing outside the government, everything inside the government, nothing but government. He wanted, in the best of compliments, he was told, or people said that, well, at least he made the trains run on time. Well, I guess that's true, but there was a lot of bad things and liberty lost in the process. So coercive federalism is, after the states lost control of the Senate in 1913, the next step was Supreme Court decisions during the 1930s that redefined what commerce was and what the general welfare clause was and meant in the Constitution. Then in the 1960s, we got LBJ's Great Society plan, and the battle was pretty much over because a lot of those things are still with us. State pushback against centralization were all bought off by grants of money. There was a call in Kansas this year to have a special session to deal with vaccine mandates and other things that were federal overreaches. And one of the more powerful legislators said, asked if he was supportive of this, said, well, the idea sounds great, but boy, I don't know, I would hate to lose $500 million a day in fines. That's how you get bought off. So federal and state cooperative projects were replaced by mandates of funding. Either do this and do it this way, or you're not going to get our money. Speaking of spending, as the rabbi started to, this is a good chart to look at. You can see that in, well, it's hard to see the numbers on this, but when Clinton's administration ended, we were about $5 trillion in debt. And that was doubled during George W. Bush's administration, primarily due to the cost of war and defending ourselves. Then that again was doubled during Obama's administration. I think one of the first things he did, which is one of the first things that got me going. Excellent, thank you. I wondered where it was. Thanks. Yeah, there we go. I wondered what that, there's got to be one on this device, but there it is. Okay, so, yeah, then we're up to $20 trillion in debt, and while Mr. Trump was still in office, that didn't go up quite as fast, but as of January 1st of 21, about the same time he left, we were at 27.7 trillion. So right now, we're at basically 29 trillion. And what's really scary is back in 2000, right in here, at 5 trillion, that was only half of our, 56% of our gross domestic product, or how much, the value of the goods and services we produced. Now our debt is 126% of our GDP. I never thought I'd see America go over 100%. It's alarming. And you can see it happens under both Republicans and Democrats. So, some things about socialism going on right now. Climate change has been made the top national priority for both our military and almost everything else. We have government-run healthcare, which was also one of the first things that got me out and got me active politically in 2009. I actually was demonstrating on the street with a placard in front of former Congressman Dennis Moore's office off of 87th Street in February. It was cold because I couldn't believe that we were going to have $900 billion in stimulus in order to, quote unquote, get us out of the 2008 recession. That was unconscionable to me. So then we got Obamacare in the middle of the night, right? And it was passed against Congress's rules, and it was almost repealed under President Trump, but one senator voted against him in the last second. So it is the predecessor of what we're living under now, which is government control of our lives through healthcare. Universal basic income has been started by actually dispersing money to families by how many children they have. We are hearing about free housing with the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Act. But there's, of course, when you have free housing, you don't have property rights. So it's just, again, it's a way to buy your rights away from you. We have diversity, equity, and inclusion, or critical race theory, taught in our schools, driven by federal public-private partnerships, such as the National Education Association and the Department of Education. We have private censorship through Google, Twitter, Facebook, and we have public surveillance through the National Security Agency and all the other intelligence agencies. We have loss of religious liberty and freedom of association, and gun restrictions are on the table. So let's talk a little bit about the solution now. And we didn't come up with this solution. We didn't invent anything. We just discovered something. So in the text of Article 5 of the Constitution, that beautiful document, the second clause indicates that there's more than one way to initiate amendments to the Constitution. And it's in bold, so you can see that, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, Congress, back up to Congress, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. So we have 27 amendments right now to our Constitution. It's true that they all, at some point, were initiated in the Congress and then were ratified by 3/4. But 16 of them started with Convention of States. And then the Congress said, oh, wow, I guess that's pretty popular. We better do something about that or we might lose our jobs. So most of them started this way. How could amendments possibly turn back the tide is a question I often get. Well, here's some specifics. There's a lot more. We need to overturn some Supreme Court decisions. We need to tighten the definitions of the enumerated powers that are listed in the Constitution. The General Welfare Clause, as interpreted, allows for Congress to tax and spend for anything it thinks is good for our welfare. That was never intended. The Commerce Clause is applied to allow government to regulate everything associated with commerce, in-state, out-of-state, and including non-commerce. That's what happened in the 1930s. The Schechter case, in 1937, a man is raising chickens to help feed his family in Brooklyn, New York. And the Congress and President passed the National Recovery Act, or that was the NRA back then. Well, the NRA came with bureaucrats and rules and regulations, et cetera, and the bureaucrats went to his house upon hearing that he was raising chickens, and they told him that he wasn't raising his chickens correctly according to the law. And he said, I'm not involved in interstate commerce. I just raise these so my kids can have some meat. And they persisted, and it went to court. Ended up going to the Supreme Court and everything. And they basically said, even though he is not raising chickens for interstate commerce, the court opinion was, well, they could have been in commerce if he had just let them. So we, therefore, have a right to make a decision on that situation. We could also sunset agencies or departments like the Department of Education that have no calling in the Constitution and that are functioning outside of the enumerated powers. The states, acting on behalf of their citizens, need to use their long dormant retained sovereignty to impose structural limits on the federal government. Because everybody I talk to that has either worked in Washington in the political side has always told me in a moment of honesty that Washington will never fix itself, right? Once you're drunk with power, you sort of stay that way and you get more drunk. You don't get sober without an intervention. None of us do. Washington needs an intervention. And so, hence, our plan, which is to use Article 5 for exactly the purpose the founders envisioned, to call a convention of states to propose amendments that limit the power of the federal government. And how it works. The people lead, and that's why you're here, and that's why I'm here. We have to do this. It's not up to, there's nobody that's going to save us. From time to time, we'll get good leaders, and from time to time, we'll get bad leaders. And right now, in the Congress, there's not enough good leaders, and I've given up hope that there ever will be. And I've seen some people run the numbers on how many election cycles it would have to take under the assumption that everybody that's voted in is good before we get a 2/3 majority to get the kind of amendments that we want. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes. And so this is the method that we seek. The people lead by asking their state legislators who represent in Kansas, your state representative represents about 22,000 people. You know, your U.S. representative represents about 800,000 people. It's much easier to get a hold of my state representative and my state senator, who represents about 75,000 people, than it is to get a hold of either of my federal representatives. And they have more power. They are federal constitutional officers by virtue of the fact that they have written out specific duties in Article 5 and other places in the Constitution. It's interesting to educate them. As we got a new flock in last year, I function as the legislative liaison for the state of Kansas. So I work with the legislators. I work on campaigns with my own time and money because we do not donate to any political party or candidate as an organization. But it's amazing once we got to 25,000 petitioners in the state of Kansas and how much sway there was in last year's election. There were people that were running for office for the first time that had signed our petition. There were people running for office that wanted our, we don't give endorsements, but were courting our vote. So now we're up to 36,000 petitioners in the state of Kansas. We've grown exponentially. So the people lead, they speak to their state legislators, get to build relationships, and they spread the word about what we're trying to do here. And it often gives people hope. Then the state legislatures have to act. They have a resolution. We have one that's active right now in the Kansas legislature. And it has to pass out of committee, and then it goes to the floor of each chamber for a vote. Oh, by the way, governors have no say in the state resolution. It's not a law. It's not a bill. It's called a resolution for a reason. But that's what the Constitution requires upon action of the state legislatures. It doesn't say anything about the governor. So we have a Democratic governor who is opposed to what we're doing. We don't need her signature. Hooray! That's one obstacle we don't need to worry about. Okay, so the resolution passes out of committee and floor votes in both chambers. And right now there are 15 states that are in that category that are passed. Once we get 34 states, then we've hit the 2/3 necessary that I read to you out of the Constitution. 34 is 2/3 of 50. The states then elect or select delegates which are commissioned to represent the state at a convention. All Congress does is name a time and a place for the first meeting to happen. The states send as many delegates as they choose, but each state gets one vote. And there's a history of over 40 interstate conventions in our history that have all followed the same rule. And we did a simulation of a convention of states in 2016 in Williamsburg, Virginia. We actually had donors step up, and we paid for 3 people from each state in the country to go to Williamsburg for 3 days. And they came up with a heck of a list of proposed amendments. And it was a great process to watch. If you go to our website, up at the top, it says one of the things is simulation. If you click on that, you don't even have to sign the petition first. You can see some of the videos of that simulation. So once all the discussion happens and things are proposed, delegates debate and vote on amendments limited to the language of their call, and amendments that they think will have the best chance of success will be passed by a majority vote. And then those amendments are sent back to the states for ratification. 38 states have to ratify anything before it becomes part of the Constitution or it becomes law. That's a pretty high bar. You can't have, you're not going to get any wacko idea past 38 states. Or the reverse is 13 states can nix anything. The Constitution is then amended, and that's that. So how are we going about doing this? We're going to talk about the resolution itself and the wording, because I referred to that. We're going to talk about the progress that we've made so far and a little bit about how you can get involved. So this is a one-page piece of paper, and this is our model state resolution. It may vary a little bit in one state or another, but it's always exactly the same in the part that matters. which is section 1 here. You can see it starts with whereas statements. These are conclusions up front. Whereas the founders of our Constitution empowered state legislators to be guardians of liberty against future abuses of power, and whereas the federal government has created a crushing national debt through improper and imprudent spending, and whereas the federal government has invaded the legitimate roles of the states through the manipulative process of federal mandates, many of which are unfunded, whereas the federal government has ceased to live under a proper interpretation of the Constitution of the United States. It's way outside its enumerated powers. And whereas it is the solemn duty of the states to protect the liberty of our people by proposing amendments to the Constitution through a convention of states under Article 5 for the purpose of restraining these and related abuses of power. Kind of sounds like the Declaration of Independence, doesn't it? Be it therefore resolved by the legislature of the state of Kansas, Section 1, the legislature of the state of Kansas hereby applies to Congress under provisions of Article 5, the U.S. Constitution, for the calling of a convention of the states limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress. So we're not just calling for term limits for congressmen. We're looking at term limits for Supreme Court justices. We're looking at civil service reform so the bureaucrats can be fired. So that's the operative language right there. And there it is blown up. And that's on any petition that you would sign as well. You can see it. This is just people that have, a couple of the people that have endorsed us, that support us. Mark Levin, actually, he's written several books in recent years. The most recent one is American Marxism. I think his group of books started with Liberty versus Tyranny, and that was like back in 2010, something like that. Well, his second or third book, well, actually his first book was Men in Black. He was talking about the Supreme Court. But the really big popular one was Liberty versus Tyranny. And then the next one was the Liberty Amendments. You can actually, view a little bit of that by just browsing on Amazon or whatever site you like. But that was what he was doing. He discovered Article 5, and he spent most of the book describing, I think he's got 23 different amendments in there that he would like to see that would give us back more, a government more like what we had. So he came right along with what we were doing and said, fantastic. He's spoken at some of our events, and he is a full endorser of what we're doing. The late, great Dr. Coburn, who was the U.S. Senator, a U.S. Senator from the state of Oklahoma, and term limited himself, and spent the last years of his life in states all across the country. I actually sat next to him in 2016 in the gallery in Topeka when our House of Representatives was voting on this. He gave testimony before the committee, before it was voted out, and he was available for expert testimony on. He passed away I think it was earlier this year in March. It might have been last year, but he dedicated the last years of his life to being a grassroots volunteer and using his name and cachet or brand name to help further our cause. And the greatest thing he would ever say is, I've been there, I've lived there, I've done that. Washington will never fix itself. Okay, this is a little graph of, not of activity so much, though, whoops, hit the wrong button. The states in green here are those that have passed. There are 15. You got to count Alaska here. The first state that passed was Georgia. You can see that our neighbor Missouri has passed, Oklahoma, Indiana has passed, North Dakota has passed. There's been activity this year. There was activity in Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, South Dakota, Iowa, Michigan. Wisconsin has been passed in one chamber. New Mexico has been passed in one chamber. South Carolina and North Carolina are both passed in one chamber, and so is West Virginia. There's been a lot of activity going on, and we could get another state this year. But the rest of these things are reflecting surveying that was done by really reputable surveying outfits in late 2017 about the population in general of these states. Would they favor this? And by party, you can see 75% of Republicans, a majority of Democrats, and 62% of independents favor what we're doing. So we're building this is what we do, is we're building the nation's largest grassroots army of citizen activists. Volunteer leadership teams, we have them in all 50 states. We have over 5 million supporters and volunteers. We have 2.2 million petitions signed right now. I remember when we hit 1 million, and we hit 2 million this year, just a couple months ago. I think Joe Biden's one of our biggest recruiters. I heard somebody say, go Brandon. Yeah, okay. So this is some of the things that our grassroots people do. Like Connie told you, she identified herself as being from District 18. Some of you may have thought, well, what's that? I thought we lived in the 3rd Congressional District. We do, but we're going around Congress. So we don't care. I mean, we care, but what's really important to us is we learn, once you get involved in Convention of States, you start thinking in terms of your state representative and your state senator. So Connie and I happen to live in the same Kansas House District 18. Okay, and yeah, our representative, she's shaking her head, is not with it. She's a Democrat, and she doesn't like us, and she won't even talk to me. And I live not very far from her, but maybe it's because I ran against her husband for city council in 2015, I don't know. So what we do public meetings like this, where we spread the word, we answer questions, we help people understand and be introduced to what we're doing. We also speak to political organizations and advocacy groups. We do home meetings with neighbors, friends, and families. We do block walking. I mean, I've done block walking since 2010 for state legislatures in Kansas, and it's one of the most fun things I do. I always wear out a pair of shoes. It's good exercise, and I love talking to people, even though I'm an introvert. So block walking, we've started taking to that too. Why not? Community events, fairs, festivals, parades, farmers markets. We were just visiting our oldest grandson in Phoenix, Arizona, my wife and I. He's 11, and Cabela's store has started having farmers markets. They like the fact that it draws business to them, and they like the fact that they're doing something for the community. And I expected to see a Convention of States booth there. Hey, here's who we are, want to sign the petition, because there's people in the audience that do that. That's what we do. We go places, we tell people what we're doing, and their eyes light up. And when their eyes light up, they want to sign the petition, they want to know more. There wasn't one. I was disappointed. So I just finished writing a little note to one of the state leaders in Arizona. Even though it's a past state, I said, you guys can't afford to just sit on your laurels. You got to keep getting more and more petitioners, because once we get the convention, we've got to get the ratification. So anyway, and then there's submissions to written and online media. We're active on social media. We write letters to editors. We do advertising. Some of our members bought billboards during this Kansas legislative session. See, in Kansas, we have a part-time legislature. It only meets from the middle of January to about the end of May with 2 breaks in there. It's a 90-day deal. Missouri, they have a full-time, year-round legislature. Their people are paid in around the neighborhood of $50,000 to $50,000. Maybe you call that a livable wage. Our legislators in Kansas make about $24,000, so they got to have another job. And then, last but not least, we communicate with our state legislators. So we're communicating outwards to people, to our neighbors, et cetera, and we're communicating upwards a little bit to our state legislators. How to get involved? Sign the petition. Help us find events and groups that we haven't talked to yet. Become a volunteer or a district captain. And Connie is a district captain for our House District 18. And what a district captain does is that they just are the lead volunteer, the most active volunteer in that House district. And they're responsible for growing the base of petition signers, educating people, increasing the presence in the community, and communicating with our legislators. Whoops. Oh, there we go. I guess that's the end of my program. So maybe I can go back to it in case there's one that you'd like to see. Well, looks like I'd have to have some help back there. So it's 10 till 8. I'm done, but I'd love to have your questions and love to respond. And besides me in the room and Connie, there are other volunteers who live in this area. I saw Lonnie Kirsch earlier. I see Angela Carroll over here. I see John Stepnoski, who's from DeSoto but has regional responsibilities. There's Steve Henning in the back, who's also a regional volunteer. And I see other petition signers. Hey, Yogi. So, and Lexi. Yes, Lexi and Bill and Maggie Casasas up here in this row. We have a World War II veteran with us tonight, folks.
Wow. Let me just interject. If anybody in the audience wants to speak, let me hand you the mic, because we have about 20 people or so viewing the live stream, and they won't be able to hear unless you're on mic. But I would like to start with just a really simple question. What can we do? I mean, you said petition. Do you have the petitions? Where do we sign them? Where do we send them? Who's raising them? What's next?
Yes, we have some here tonight in paper form. But you can always sign the petition on our website, which is conventionofstates.com. Conventionofstates.com, and we will deliver it to your state legislators and send you an email or text message or otherwise confirm to you that we have done that for free. So, Connie.
There's forms in the back that you can sign. Once you sign it, we enter it, and that's what Ben's saying is that then it goes directly to your legislatures, and you will get a letter back telling you who they are. Also, we wanted to tell them about it is confusing about districts, and basically you can go. Ben, tell them how they do that.
Yeah, to find out what district you're in, you can go to the Kansas legislature's website, but they're going to send you to a third-party website, so I'll just give it to you directly. It's openstates.org. Openstates.org. And you just type in your address, and they bring up your state legislatures and their contact information for you. So you figure out, so you know what district you're in. Right here, we're sitting, I think we're in 20. Just to the west of us is 16. And as Connie said, 18 is North and Shawnee, so.
And Shawnee actually has three districts,
Right.
actually almost. So it's really broken down into our state representative districts. So if you know what the state districts are, that's the district. But the reason you want to know your district is because, like the petition you sign, if you're in my district, it'll come across my computer, and then I see who you are, and I verify it, and I always try to call everybody. Then you're on our mailing list, and our e-blast, John does our blasting, and you can get more involved that way. I've had a couple home meetings where it's just, I've called like 5 or 6 of the new people and just had them come, and we just talk kind of individually, have discussions that way. So that's a big one too.
Great. What questions might you have? Connie, do you want to deal with those, or is Patricia, or?
I just want to know, how do we have only 2 million signatures but 5 million volunteers?
Sure. Well, it's 5 million supporters, not volunteers.
Okay.
And the
So
support.
why are they not signing the petitions?
Some of them have not. Some of them are donors that want to remain anonymous, I suppose. But John, you've dug into that a little bit more than I have. You want to add to that?
Well, a person who has signed a petition can also be a supporter.
Okay.
So some people are counted twice in that respect.
There we go.
But there are 5 million people involved people from the standpoint. For example, I can be a supporter, I can be a volunteer, I can be a petition signer.
Right.
Now, I might be counted twice.
Right.
But the fact is that 2.2 million petition signers and another couple million people who have donated to the organization is really what we're talking about, and we're growing exponentially as people get more and more aware of who we are.
Great.
And we need to tell everybody, because too many times I hear from my neighbors and friends, I've never heard of Convention of States. And I say, oh, well, there's 36,000 people that have signed our petition here in Kansas, and I go through the statistics, but we can't assume that people know who we are. Don't
Right.
do that. And all they can do is say no.
Right.
But if the question is never asked, it never can be answered.
And to your question about donors, I guess I'm one of those that would be counted twice, because I decided that I would give a small amount monthly because, I'm retired, but I work full-time on this, and why shouldn't some of my money go to it too? So anyway, next question. So hand up back here. Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead and you can ask, or here comes the microphone. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to share something and ask you to correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
In Kansas during the last session, there was a vote about the Convention of States. And my understanding is it did not pass. And I asked a couple of our representatives why they voted no. And I'm sharing this because we each have the opportunity to contact our legislators. We can go through all of the Convention of States doors, but we have a direct door to our legislators. We've elected them, and we are to hold them accountable. They work for us, they serve us, but if they don't hear from us, they don't know that we mean business. So the few legislators that I spoke with who voted no, which surprised me, was because in this session, the people wanting to get it passed were pursuing a majority vote as opposed to a 2/3 vote, which is what our state constitution requires. And so if you have a question, if you go and you look, and on the Kansas State Legislature page, you can check out any bill and you can see how your own legislator voted on any given bill. And if they didn't vote for it, I encourage you to contact them and ask them why not. And it may be that they were not against the Convention of States itself, but they were against violating the Kansas Constitution, which honestly I think is critical. Why break one to support another? We want, at least I do, our legislators to be above reproach so that should this pass, if they were to do a majority vote and it pass, rather than following the Constitution, that's going to put us 2, 5, 10 steps back.
Let me ask you a question. How many states, it sounds like you've really delved into this, and boy, you're exactly the kind of person that we want calling and writing legislators.
I do.
Excellent. Did you know that we were the only state in the union that has a 2/3 majority requirement?
I did not know that, and to be totally honest, Convention of States is not my wheelhouse. That is not,
Sure.
not the bat that I hit my legislators over the head with.
Right.
And, but I actually live in Leavenworth County, and our legislators are amazing.
Oh, yeah. Who's your legislator, David French or Pat Proctor? Or?
Tim Johnson.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and
Great
so
guy.
These guys are great. I did not know that, but the legislators that I spoke to were not in my area, but I highly respect them and honestly greatly respect their no. But again, I just think people miss a tremendous opportunity to have a say through your legislators. That's what the design was. And so whether it's about Convention of States, health freedom, taxes, term limit, if you have
Life.
an opinion, yes. And you don't need to send them a long letter, but let them know that you're alive and well and paying attention to what they're doing.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that. I just wanted people to understand, since she brought it up, that Kansas is the only state that has a 2/3 majority restriction. There is one other state that has, there's only one other state that has any restriction, and that's Illinois, which is a Democratic state. And you know what their restriction is? 60%, or 3/5. So and I'm the one that's one of the few that have done the research on this. And our legislators in 1974, in the dead of night, I kid you not, on the third reading of a bill with a bunch of other constitutional amendments to be considered, slipped that in. It was not even discussed in committee. It was never discussed on the floor. It was presented as a package to the legislators and then to the population in November of 1974 when I was in high school in this area. And my Democratic parents voted for it. It was meant to be a stopgap to overturning Roe versus Wade because the abortion lobby is deep in Kansas. So we have multiple rulings saying that that is unconstitutional in both Illinois and Kansas because the power that Kansas vested for that, it vested when it became a state in 1861. And it's sitting in Article 5. And you cannot mess with the U.S. Constitution through the state constitution. Over 20 court cases over 100 years from 1919 to the most recent one in 2018 over in Missouri when they challenged when Missouri passed their resolution and became a past state. a suit was brought and said, wait a minute, that's not that's not a good enough resolution. And the judge said, well, you don't have standing, sir, but I'm going to answer your question as if you did. And in one and a half pages, he said what I just said to you. So that's why we were trying as an organization, after having been through both chambers and getting a majority vote in each chamber, but failing to get 2/3, trying to have a run at a simple majority and seeing what happened, because we know the law is on our side. But we can talk about more of that later. Sir, you have a question.
Well, I just wanted, it's not really a question, but you probably already know that in 1871, we changed from the United States for America, and we became a corporation. And so that's something to look into. That could take another hour or two to talk about that. But then also, you had mentioned something about us being in war to defend our country, but I think deep down, I think you know that all wars are based on deception, and the bin Laden family and the Bushes, they're actually really close friends at one time, and they used to hang out, and they were all part of the CIA and everything, and so there's no valid reason for any of the wars that have ever taken place, but I appreciate everybody here, and we just really, really have to do our part to really, really be involved, obviously, as much as possible. My friend and I, we went to the Bards Fest in St. Louis, and they had a bunch of people, Mike Lindell, and pastors and lawyers and doctors just speaking out, and so as much as we can to just be bold. And I've been to airports, I've been to a lot of places without having my face covered, and they say every 15 minutes at the airports on a loudspeaker that you have to have your face fully covered. They say all passengers, but that's not my name, so don't fall for the propaganda. All right.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Hey, my question's not really about the Convention of States. You said that this is being live streamed. Where is this being live streamed, and will you be able to watch it later?
Rabbi?
There's two ways to access the live stream. The easiest is just go to HaOlam.com and click on to see archives or to see live streams later. Just click here. It'll take you to our YouTube channel. Or you can go to youtube.com and look up HaOlam Messianic Synagogue. Either way. But yeah, it'll be out there basically forever until whoever controls YouTube takes it down.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? We have a minute or two.
If the state certifies a convention of states, who sets the agenda of topics? And what you had mentioned about a simple majority, I'm concerned about the Electoral College, that could be brought up and work against us. So how does this work?
Okay. The states run the process start to finish. So Congress doesn't. Outside parties don't. The states commission their commissioners. I wish I could get back to my presentation here. I don't know how to do that. And I know that Brett's gone. Do you know how to do that, Rabbi? Okay. I see PowerPoint is still selected down here, but no. Thumb drive. But I can do it without that. So, you did know. You knew more than you knew.
What I do with computers is I keep pushing buttons.
Oh, blessed be. Oh, did I go too far already? No.
Right there.
Okay, so first of all, it's in our language. What I'm hearing your question to be is who controls the process? Once a convention is called, you know, what happens? You know, we all think of conventions as sometimes freewheeling. Usually, though they're not, they meet for a specified purpose, they follow an agenda, they take care of business, and they disband. And the same thing here. The states control, and the call itself is, the only thing here is limiting the federal government. That is the overall topic. So do you think if somebody got up and said, you know, I think we ought to consider an amendment to repeal the Second Amendment or the Electoral College, in your case, in your example. That first of all, the parliamentarian would say, well, let's see. Does that put fiscal restraints on the federal government? No. Does it limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government? Electoral College. No, the Electoral College actually is kind of pro-state and pro the rest of the country. It guarantees that any president is not just the most popular, but broadly represents the entire country. So no, it's not really germane there. And then does it limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government or limit the terms of office of its official? No. That would be not germane. Thank you for your suggestion. Next. That's how that would get handled. Yeah. And the states, since they control this, and once they pass, states get really serious about this. Indiana, Louisiana, and another state have already passed laws now where they're called faithful commissioner laws. So if a commissioner goes and votes against his or her commission, they can be charged with a felony in those states, fined, and put in jail. And for sure, the state legislature is going to call them, and they've created means, if the legislature's out of session, for them to be recalled and replaced. There's a backup slew of commissioners to fill spaces if someone is sick, dies, or abuses their commission. Did I answer your question? Okay. Others? Okay. Just a second. Yes.
Suggest that anybody who is, oh, I got to turn.
Oh, it's on.
Okay. Don't eat it, but yeah. I would suggest to anyone who has not attempted to get signatures to do this. It's probably the most important thing of all, is to get more and more signatures. That's obvious, of course. But what may not be obvious to you is that you will get signatures if you ask. It's amazing. I had great doubts that anyone would sign. But see your friends, see your relatives, see your acquaintances, see your neighbors. All they can do that's negative is say no. So get out there and get the signatures. That's the most important thing we can do. And I hope you'll try that. Keep in mind, if you're going to get signatures, you've got to understand what you're asking them for. So make sure you've got the answers, because you will get the questions. And in attempting to get a signature, you're challenging them a little bit, and they're going to challenge you back with questions why and how this thing is going to work. One of the questions that you will get that I think a lot of people miss the answer to is that nothing but what is enumerated in the language of the, if we pass this, what was the correct name for this? The resolution. Yes, the resolution. Is that it will apply only to those things that are listed in the language, which is specifically those 3 areas. A lot of people say, oh, I'm a little afraid. You get open, you get a convention open and they get working on this and people in power will take over and make a whole bunch of changes that we don't want. Not so. If we pass it, we're passing 3 specific things. One of them is fairly broad, of course, when you start talking about limiting the authority of the federal government in more or less general terms, but nevertheless, you need to have answers for it. The other point I would make is when you get a signature, or if you think you're going to get a signature, but you're not sure, first of all, if they sign up right then and there, you take that, hang on to that form. You've got it now, okay? Don't wait for them to mail it in. They may change their mind. And don't accept the idea that, well, I'll think it over and if I want it, I'll mail it. Say, well, when you sign it, give it to me, please. You put a little pressure on them then because they can't just, they're going to have to come back and say, no, I don't want to sign it. Not many people will do that. So those are the 2 points I would make. We got 46 signatures in hand when we tried it. It works.
It works. What did we get at the fair?
Thank you, Bill.
5,300, 53 at the fair?
Oh, at the state fair this year, we got well over 3,000.
3,500, yeah, we did.
And when we first started doing the fair in 2017, we thought 400 was a big number. And then it was, the next year, it was double. And the last time we were at the fair, we almost got 1,000. Of course, they canceled it for COVID last year. So the last time we did it was in 2019. And then this year, we certainly more than doubled. We got over 3,000. So very good points by Mr. Casasa, who has gotten over 45 petitions with his wife, Maggie, where they live, and from friends and family. So excellent points, and I wanted to bring your attention.
We really should tell people
Sure.
that, Ben, we really should tell people that Bill here is 99 years old.
No.
And yes, we need to, and he is a World War II vet who fought at the Battle of the Bulge. And he is a loyal patriot. But he came and spoke to us, and this just stuck on my mind, Bill. One of the people said, well, Bill, what do you think about, how did all this happen? And you dropped your head like this. And then you looked, and he said, I dropped the ball. And I thought, yeah, I dropped the ball too. I'm a vet. I thought we did our thing, and we closed our eyes. We raised our families. We spent a lot of time making some money and trying to keep everything together. And in the interim, we let the federal government get out of control, and it broke my heart. and he said it right. We dropped the ball, and we have to pick it up, and we can do this. But
I just got to say that you've overaged Bill
oh.
by a few years.
Okay, well, 96, 97, I mean, whatever. What is it, Bill?
96?
96, okay.
You come to a point when you don't want to add any more years. At least not publicly. Okay, the other point to this is this is the language from the Constitution. Okay, it says that the convention will propose amendments will be part of this Constitution, not another one. This is not calling for a constitutional convention, as many of our opponents misunderstand and use that label. They'll call it a constitutional convention or a con-con. That's from a liberal disinformation campaign that was started in the 60s and has taken hold in a couple of conservative groups. And they raise money by trying to scare our legislators every year when our when our legislation comes up. This is not a constitutional convention. It's part of our duty under this Constitution. Every organization has a board of directors. This synagogue has a board of elders and a rabbi, and they meet and they decide policy, and they see when changes are necessary. They make decisions. And it's the same thing here with our government. The states are the board of directors. We need a board of directors meeting, and we haven't had one in a very long time. So, yes, ma'am.
Would you, given what you said about Kansas, I don't know if you're prepared or comfortable, but would you explain how Kansas could go forward given the contradiction between the U.S. Constitution and what you're saying, the Kansas? Would it take a repealing of what happened in 1974, or could you give us an explanation so we know how to
Address
approach
that
or address our
when
legislators?
legislators? Thank you. I'd love to. There's a number of ways. We have tried to get the most number of votes possible in each chamber. In 2016, in our House of Representatives, of 125, so think of the numbers with me for a minute. I'm not a numbers guy. So a simple majority out of 125 would be 63. The two-thirds majority requirement would be 84 votes. In 2016, we got 77. By far and away more than a simple majority, but not enough, right? In 2018, when we were in the Senate before this year, and it was last voted on in 2018. The actual resolution was not voted on this year. A motion was made by a senator to send it back to committee because he didn't like the idea of appealing to a simple majority. He wanted, and he also didn't like the amendment that one of our opponents inserted into the resolution at the last minute. So that was part of the calculus there. So what we can do, and in 2018 we got 22 out of a 40-member chamber in the Senate, we got 22 votes, a clear majority, against 16 voting against, and 2 who were absent. So to get 2/3, I don't know that any state has gotten 2/3 or even 60% necessarily. Maybe a couple states have gotten 60%, but definitely not 2/3. So if every state were held to that standard, we'd be nowhere. And our rights under the U.S. Constitution would have been damaged, destroyed. And right now, Kansans are only counted as 2/3 of a person. We're only 2/3 as good as a person in Missouri or Texas who have passed this by simple majority. Come on. You can see the injustice going on there. Okay, so our method is going to have to be either what the pro-life people did, try to get a constitutional amendment to get that taken out, or what we were trying to do this year, and may try again, I don't know, we haven't finalized our strategy yet, it's under discussion right now. What we were trying to do in the House, the court said that if the legislative body set a rule that it had to have 2/3, that was okay, because it says the legislatures are the arbiter, okay? But when the legislature kicks off that responsibility and says, here, folks, don't you think it would be a better idea if 2/3 of us approved this, and they vote on that, they're saying that's the part that's illegal, unconstitutional. So right now in the Senate, there is no Senate rule that a resolution such as ours has to pass by 2/3. So we were simply following the chamber rules and seeking a simple majority in the Senate. Now, in the House, there is a specific rule that says a call for a convention of states or a motion to ratify an amendment coming from Congress or a convention has to pass by 2/3. So we would need a rule change in the House. And we tried on that earlier in the session this year, and we failed there too. Okay, so what we want is for them to recognize their own authority, have appropriate rules to allow this to pass by a simple majority so that we can be equal citizens to our sister states. John? Oh, yeah. I mean, we keep working on 2/3 all the time. But there are certain people that, I mean, I've been involved in this since late 2015. Okay, this is 6 years later, and our country's just gotten worse and worse and worse to the point where it's, hanging over the cliff. And I don't like that, and it's not right. It's not the ends justify the means. I'm not that kind of a person. It's that I've read at least 5 of the 20 some odd court cases, and they make it very plain that this is not okay. So that's one way to try it, yeah.
Ben, I got a question, and I want to make 2 comments.
Go.
First of all, Bill Casassa said he got 46 petitions from people that live in the area he lives in. He's 96 years old. You're never too old to keep going, folks. That's number one. Number 2, do you realize that the last amendment ratified in the U.S. Constitution took over 200 years to do it? Over 200 years to do it. It was part of the original Bill of Rights. So 7 years is not a long time. That's the second comment. The third question I have is, we talk about enumerated powers a lot in everything we're talking about. Does everybody understand the concept of enumerated powers? And if not, Ben, would you go ahead and kind of walk through that as it relates to what you would call originalists who look at the Constitution of the United States?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the federal government was created by state legislators. That's another reason why we are appealing to them. They created something that hadn't been created yet. I mean, where did it exist? They looked at history. They looked at Greece and Rome and other civilizations and countries and forms of government, right? So what they did was they were very scared, and there were debates about whether to ratify this new Constitution or not, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. And there are specific enumerated powers in the Constitution. And the commentators at the time said, well, folks, who were afraid that the federal government would go beyond those enumerated powers. Well, those are the enumerated powers pretty much right there. And it has. And one of the ways they said and put in there for it to get back in its lane if it got out of its lane, we are not using. And we need to. And we need to believe in our cause and in doing what is constitutionally correct enough to get out of our comfort zones and do our duties as citizens. We each have a little bit of sovereignty residing in us by virtue of the fact that we were created equal in God's eyes, and we were created by God. And so the Constitution recognizes that and wants us to use it to push us back to this and to the enumerated powers and keeping the government from, the Supreme Court justices from just making up, a new power for itself, and then everybody just goes along with that. I'm old enough to remember Roe v. Wade. I thought that would be repealed or overturned so many times, and here we are, 40 some odd years later, and it hasn't. And Obamacare now, I thought was going to be repealed, and here we are. So, folks, we are the final check on the Supreme Court making mistakes. They're just human beings, just like us. They make mistakes. They're subject to partisanship. And our republic doesn't work unless all of us work it. And so that's why we want a grassroots army. We want we the people to be in charge. Not some special interest group that wants special favors, that wants special treatment. We're all the same, and we're equal. So that's my answer to that. Yeah, Connie, someone's got a question right over here. Oh, you've got it.
Okay. So have you guys gone to each one of the counties and asked each one of the counties if they would not send a representative who did not, like they would pass it in the county? Reno County says we're not sending anybody unless they understand that one of the things that if the Convention of States comes up, Reno County will vote this, you know, Colby County, you know what I'm saying, go through all the counties. So instead of taking it, go to the legislature and in a sense,
go down a step.
Start really small with each county, and the county insists that their representative they send to the legislature has to vote like that.
That's a viable approach, and we have started doing that across the country. The problem is the counties no longer have, before the Supreme Court decision in the 1950s, the counties did have some authority over representation in the state legislature. They do not anymore. But a resolution.
What do you mean by that? I'm a precinct leader. I'm trying to. I'm
Me
very
too.
active. I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that.
The counties have parties, and the parties are organized by county. But the county doesn't have any. It was stripped out in the changes.
That's why the precinct leader, they need to fill every single precinct, and the precinct leaders need to start taking back and telling their parties, no, we're the first voice to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to, and if you don't listen to what we're telling you, we're gonna make sure you're not in the position you're in, or you need to go bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I also wanna know if the Convention of States is gonna do anything about shadow governments, because in your list of, you know, the way it's written,
right.
when the conversation gets brought up, the Bar Association tells our Senate who the 3 names to give to our governor. Our Bar Association is
Right.
putting our judges in. So you got these little associations and fellowships and everything that are little shadow governments that are creating legislation, that are doing all these things, and I'm dealing with this right now. So the charter in Johnson County, the charter commission's going on right now.
Right.
And it comes every 10 years. And I was told by 2 of the charter members, they said they put out a red herring on the sheriff. We're going to make him go to we don't want him to be elected anymore. We want him to it's a red herring. They want us to talk about this, but they don't want us to talk about all the backroom deals, the planning and development that was done at MARC, Mid-America Regional Council, that is creating legislation,
Right.
and then they're telling our Board of Supervisors what to do.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out when you guys get this, if you get this done, are you talking about that underpinning stuff? Because
because we're limiting power. We are limiting the attractiveness to be in Washington and be controlled by a non-representative body and be paid by them and won over by graft, et cetera, because we're limiting how long they can stay, we're limiting the power that they have authority to fund. They can't, if there's no Department of Education, they can't fund it, right?
Yeah, a lot of money's scooting through all those departments,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. But back to your question, yeah, we seek resolutions, and many counties in Kansas have already passed resolutions in favor of Convention of States, and cities as well, but there's not binding authority there. In terms of your first question of, we won't send a representative to Topeka unless it's somebody who will vote for this, or the county doesn't have that power. But the county, if all of our counties or more of our counties were to pass these resolutions, they would have, apply more pressure to the state legislatures, for sure. Okay, it's after 8:30. I'm conscious of tiredness and time, and I think we'll just wrap it up there. I really appreciate all of you coming, and let us know out front if there's a piece of literature you want to take or a petition you'd like to sign tonight, if you're ready. If not, again, our website is conventionofstates.com, and I'm happy to give business cards to anyone who has a question you want to follow up with me on. So, Rabbi, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I would just like to do what we do a lot around here, and that is pray. Because I guess even in the Federal Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, they prayed a little bit when they were in distress. So we're in distress, we're in big time distress. So let's just reach out our hands to this brother here, Ben Terrell, got it, and all that's involved, and we just appreciate that. So Heavenly Father, we just look to you, and you are in charge of government. You say kings rule by me, and you cause as the rivers of water, so you turn the hearts of the kings. So Father, we're just looking to you right now in this time in our country, and we had a series on the Constitution. And Father, we just pray right now that the principles of righteousness and holiness and biblical living would again be enforced in our land in these dimensions and in all dimensions actually, but at least in these particularly we're working on. We pray you give all these workers wisdom and energy and funding and anointing to do what needs to be done. We just pray you would bless. You know what the future holds. You know what wars there might be. You know all that. But we right now pray that we would do our little part in bringing righteousness back, bringing righteousness to our land. In the name of Yeshua, that's Jesus' Hebrew name. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah. Amen. Amen. Okay.